they're cute, so it works out.
When y'all are like on Zoom and you do the reaction thing, like why does it automatically assume our skin color? Like, because I didn't set it up that way, but it's like just been that way.
They're cute, so
Is it gold?
No, it's brown. When you're like on Zoom and you do the reaction thing, like why does it automatically assume our skin color? Oh my god, like, I didn't set it up that
because
way.
Zoom is
like
woke.
just in that way.
Because Zoom is woke.
Is it gold?
Wow. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We're live stream, but I don't mean that at all.
When you do the reaction thing, like why does it automatically assume our skin color? Oh my god,
Where I thought a lot of conversation was happening, it was just the feedback on the stream.
It was just me.
I was talking to the stream. We love that for me. Hello, folks who are watching the stream. We're about to get started, so don't you darn worry. It's about to be a good one. I'm excited for this. I think they're excited for this. It's going to be a good time. But in very true Jasmine fashion, even though I should be so used to this by now, I am working on getting everything copy pasted and shared. So if you can give me a few good minutes and we will get started. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Get a pen and paper, or if you're a computer person, can't relate, get your flow out, because there is going to be an IG poll at the end of this debate. So we're going to know who was affirmative or negative. We're going to settle this debate. Even though a lot of you are only just going to click Af or neg without any context, substance, or whatever. But you know what? Form over content, baby. Form over content. Kidding. Maybe not. But yeah, we're going to get started soon.
Why are you telling the kids to vote F immediately?
I didn't say anything. Good job. All I said, first of all, I am innocent until proven guilty. All I was talking about was an IG poll and how people don't think. People. I'm just telling what people do.
No, I feel you. Yeah, I'm put behind on that. I gotta fight back on that in this debate. But I got you.
All right, neg. Smart debate.
Oh, I have to set up the email chain, right? That's
Yes.
I forgot about that. Okay, anyone who wants to be on the email chain, put your email in the chat.
Why don't you just upload the files to the Zoom chat so you don't have to make mute?
Can I do that?
You can.
Yeah, in the chat there'll be a little button that says file in the top right next to the ellipses, and it should let you add something that's on your computer.
All right.
Gen Zs are, I guess we're all Gen Z technically, but the real true Gen Zs built different. Y'all built different. Y'all just know stuff. You just be knowing.
It's trial and error.
See, I don't try to err. It's too scary. It's too scary. Scary things.
That's an absolute mood, though.
I need it safe. All right. Spar debate with at Coudoir and K. Oh, yeah. YouTube is getting a choir today from me. Okay. It's going down in 2 minutes. Boom. Post. Love that for me. Boom. Boom. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to start talking and we will get started with all this. Make sure that because hey, DeMarvin. Looking at the YouTube minute. Okay. Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Debate Boutique post. You already know what's going down, why the vibes are high, why we're super excited to be here. If you have not already, I promise you this is about post number 25,000 from Debate Boutique. this summer, and you've watched at least a video now, to make sure that you hit the subscribe button, like, comment, hit the post notification bell so that you can stay tuned to every single time that we post. We enjoy being able to offer these resources, not only to our students, but to the community, because we believe in generating, access and resources from the bottom up, and that means sharing. And so let's make that the new normal. But I'm super excited for this upcoming SPAR debate. Before I talk about that, the last kind of informational for you is that August 15th, new fall services are going to be launched for private coaching, subscription-based services, and so much more. And so stay tuned with that via subscribing to our newsletter, which you can do on the website. We are limited availability. So once we launch and once spots are filled, that's it until we expand, or until we don't have those spots anymore. So make sure that you are subscribed to that, because we're going to have some promos and deals to get us started for the fall season. Super excited to be working with the students that we do, the programs that we will, and everything that is to come for Debate Boutique. Now that I am done talking about the things that you already knew, because you're already subscribed and you're already part of the newsletter and you're already part of the Debate Boutique vibes, is this SPAR debate a pro-SPAR debate of legends, of very smart, intellectual people who I probably would be sweating if I had to get back in the ring and debate again, because no thank you, I am not putting myself out there on the internet like that anymore. Actually, JK, Tuesday. But super excited for this postmodernism versus critical race theory SPAR. The structure of it is that there's going to be basically the entirety of a debate minus the 1 and R. So this is 1v1. On the affirmative, we have Kate Marin, who is a sophomore at the University of Binghamton, didn't sound right, Binghamton University. And then on the negative, who will be representing critical race theory versus postmodernism, is Kujwa Osei, who is going to be a senior at the University of Pittsburgh and is also an NDT semifinalist. Let me scratch that back, because Kate deserves her flowers as well. A CETA octafinalist. So we've got some people who've been doing some really awesome things in the activity and are here to show what the best version, the most advanced version of these arguments look like for you all on this Good Sunday. So without a further ado, I'm going to turn the focus, as it should be, on them to provide a really awesome debate. I hope you all enjoy. Buckle up. The IG poll will be posted right after this debate so that you can let us know, was it affirmative or was it negative?
Alrighty, I'm gonna put the 1AC doc in the Zoom chat. I don't know if I can, it says network disconnect. Okay, if this doesn't work, I'm just gonna build an email chain, so give me 1 sec.
Oh, you can't put it in the Discord? Drop the file in Discord?
You know, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna do that. Alrighty, let me grab paper and like pick up my computer and set up a timer and stuff, and then we'll get going. All right, can I get a thumbs up to make sure that people have the 1AC? Awesome, I got 1 thumbs up. Oh, Kuchwa, I already sent it to you. There's a poem in there now, and I took one card out, but.
I have to listen to poetry. Oh,
I know.
no. You're good.
Devastating. Okay, cool. Let me open the doc. Oh, that's hilarious. The one I see is not even open on my computer. That's a great start. It's now an impromptu speech. Whoa, cool. All right. Is anybody not ready? Awesome, good vibes. And oh, I thought it was frozen. It's not. Alrighty. Okay, let's do it. Inequality is no longer solely marked by the material conditions of capital. In the information age, everything is designated for consumption. Even water has become a symbol, a mechanism to reinforce power structures via constant renegotiation of meaning. That's BO and 17. Budget organizing consumer society consumption ever fulfillment always simultaneously the aspiration of identity, including status or class. Drinking expensive bottled water compared to tap water decided rise in the social scale. We want to brand ourselves even with something that's ordinary as a drink of water. Culture consumption implies the primary effect of bottled water consumption, social and biological. More of a human beings in contemporary Western society live in a particular kind of society inequality marked forced by market transaction and economic power of the machine imposed violence. We need to be concerned about the kind of thing we consume, the clothes we wear, the local water we drink, pleasure, further notes that way. Because consumption means to reinscribe clashing with the dynamic economy and see individual society being subject to constantly being renegotiated when large numbers of people seek to distinguish themselves in need for status differentiation is satisfied by distinguishing among water bottle brands. Power places a premium on obedience to the real truth and to itself. It operates through direction and representation, relies on simulation as an organizing principle of the real. We are locked in a space, class, and time on the grid of hyper-reality under constant panoptic gaze. Here we become the commodity reduced to pure information. Time and space are social here, but control is always and everywhere, and your resistance always only makes it stronger. That's Luke in 19. Political reality, the priority of the employers in a postmodern hyper-realism organized around institutions, social intelligence, pre-informational societies, tie back into bias and pressure from media, creates linear panoptical mode of space in which the states a sense of place of reason, the class status, or geographical perspective of space, but they social time changes incremental linear presumes its own production by power relations outside or within. It's opportunity to use media production of application power without oversight, leadership assumes roles, hence individuals are seen as rebels, headed to cast off curves that controls the state places, criminal obedience, integration into hegemony, ideologies can be totalistic, express program, predictive, theoretical map, power works through logic, recursive, determined, continuous indoctrination, monetization, materials, powerful state entities, normalize individual mass behavior. The analog clock creates and regulates time by moving continuously through an enclosed space. This actual actors of representation. Ontological next to hyperrealism, freedom of postmodern, structure of cultural space and time, generating informational numbers of transnational communication exchange, continuing innumerable hyperreal constructs of unique, non-identical realities. Media is capable of social time change, market seeking permutation, Taoist simply on existing configuration, discontinuity, differentiate from any other event, power and type reality is imploded, non-linear, and appears to evaporate, no more health, and the secret extracted for the secrecy of power, the same as secreted, does not exist. Informational power is seductive, motivating, subject with images, reproducing, completing codes. Seduction is stronger than production. We conceive a new power catastrophic when power no longer sees producing the real, producing itself real, and opening new space to reality, principle, the end of power, and end of strategy, revealing within. Such space is not a threat to social order. Everyone can silence themselves, a rebel. This new organization of power forces individuals behaving collaborators, completing outlines of a trained personal choice. Powerful is acceptable range of value of putting emphasis on container, deeper roots of its descendants, resistance or opposition existing beneath the constraints of collaboration, power, and hyperreality, fossil logic, collaborative, containment, and constant currency. Secret great politician to know that power does not exist. Hyperreality is a complete synchrony of realities. In fact, design there's a spatial sense of time, literacy, and typographic conscious function that acts deals up to the cultural reproduction. The crisis taken activated fixed point of view. Those with less access to watch the screens follow codes who connotation stipulate each. Citizens complete their own scripts, ratchet fantasies, process create permissive individuals, and co-create the power that dominates them on. Shifting media scape deliberates themselves in self-direction, consumptive utopian moments affirm the ideology of capital, overload, rationality, and collective choice. Their weaknesses may actually strengthen coded covert commodification. Simulation requires almost total integrity, actually becoming what many regard as real and mass democracy recognizes simulation organizing principle requires substitution of science for reality. The ethos of national electoral policy rests upon the panic strict efforts to produce consensus simulated hyperreality of public life emerge. There can be no legibility and resistance. The code is to represent, is to subordinate and violate the masses, can no longer act as political subjects, only as consumers. As ontology discards metaphysics. Hyper-ontology describes hyperreality, or a reflection of what can be when nothing is. That's Luke in 19. Today's industry produce consumers produce an infinitely more costly than that of goods of foreign substance society manufactures the same competition that individual desires to automatize as for the individual subject or episodic conducted meaning advance. Capital society experiencing imposed force eliminated by which power circulating in the mass institution today's social mass is neither subject or object person relation to historical references statistical entities traces appear in the survey no longer representable the medium as message status hyperconformity radical activity boils down to overuse of the consumer more traditional resistance consists of reinterpreting the group's code to the masses now except for meter action speculative acquiring code meaning without resistance making everything determined not even nonsense but over manipulation counterfeits imposes synthetic core of meaning derived from our implementation the real meaning here flows forms predicated on suspension of object reality for relative reference discussed from relativity is always unreal no object concept. Conceptual representation can encapsulate that which is real means of information unhinged traditional relation to the all operative principles of information order simulation all abstract brain function simulation no longer that of a territory referential being or substance of generation modes models of real without origin or reality hyperreal territory no longer precedes math nor survives the math that precedes the territory provisional hyperontology metaphysics what first falls to the wayside the reals produce reproduce from an infinite number of times and lower has to be rational lower measured against some ideal nothing more than operational no longer real at all hyperreal product of an elimination of difference between the true and the false accompanying the object the real and the representation we think in a fiction that is nostalgic for the future we play a game of representation and distortion, a radical thinking of the world as becoming free from the constraints of verification. We do not represent reality. There is no reality in representation. We think of poetry and cinema. When cinema dreams of Baudrillard, what does it see? That's the red and 11. Proceed from the film double proposed image life moves with static analysis we take consideration that which within itself refutes the logic of belonging identity confirmation every film thinks the framework for those here not providing an autopsy of the film entering into an understanding of its view what does the film think about who does it converse with for what purpose considering images as a critical act seeking to deploy their own powers the encounter between Baudrillard and cinema no longer has anything to do with two close concepts of the world the origin theoretical catalyst and proposition the acceptance of reimagination of capacity to mutate what does cinema think about when it dreams of Baudrillard a world under form of control simultaneously transparent and totally opaque a paradoxical world without which I am shown not that which is Baudrillard simulation not a hard theory thinking impression of the world a metaphysics of poetic thinking which prefers anticipation over deconstructive elevation over autopsy elliptical intuition over demonstration probability over certainty we can speak Baudrillard's language out over knowing his vocabulary orality of thought is required to eliminate vividness combined Baudrillard with cinema the ontological implication we do in nations history and fiction become for Baudrillard an object of reflection fiction is not imagination what anticipates imagination by giving form of reality should never inhabit true fiction we are condemned to imaginary and to nostalgia for the future we've lost the lead which ideas had over the world the distance spend that idea remain an idea an absolute passion for competitive dynamics for theoretical games between fictions and their models the war has been turned into film the film turns into war the two are combined by technology invent a security system prevents any event whatsoever from occurring art constitutes a radical thinking in the world such as it's becoming this thinking is freed from the constraints of verification watching the twilight that thirst of living days thirst like salted drunkenness that pain spreading like a steam in someone's retina but still no not me I can't in Gelado or Georgia or wherever somewhere an aching dusk starts and look at the red sunset as if to die as if to live smearing blood all over the window someone is dying instead of me painstakingly the sun sets painstakingly a person dies painstakingly the earth spins and as it does I look out into the world inside an incubator my job is after you are done dying to put on white gloves glimmer coldly and only then finally enter death we are willing to die for this debate that's Michelson in 16 Jay argued the guerrilla fighter need not die in every battle, but he must be ready to give his life. Each guerrilla fighter is ready to die. Guerrero is careful to distinguish willingness to die from will to die. Unnecessary self-exposure is bad strategy. Death is revolutionary only as a code of practice. Only commitment unto death can prevent taming revolution under reformism. Willing to fight then an enemy to the last drop of our blood is always critical. Black Panthers not romantics. You cannot be a revolutionary expecting sides that choose a force are Cubans, North Vietnamese. The concept of revolutionary suicide is not fatalistic. Newton's text imputes it has the logical connotation, the greater, more immediate danger of the survival of the entire world limits suicide can be challenged suicide machine of the racist or side the Panthers redeemed. Fundamental threat to the US revolutionary because it explodes itself in declaration of its finitudes far from the suicide. Being posited is the ideology of pure identity is claimed there to embody the passing of every sovereign. And that's all I got. So, open for cross once I sit down.
Quick question, are y'all using college times? Yeah.
Oh, are we supposed to be using college times?
You can, yeah.
Oh, in that case, I guess I will read the card that I wasn't gonna read. Hold on.
I thought it was fair, especially 1v1. I want your best version.
While you're doing that, do I still not get the full neck block?
You do not get a full neck block, no.
Okay.
That 2NC just has to get it done.
I'll try. I'll see what happens.
You got, what is it, 1 minute plus 9 minutes? You got about 10 minutes. No, you got about 13 minutes to figure it out.
All right.
Something in that world. I don't know.
Send this in a minute, but I'm gonna do this card, I guess. This is part and parcel with a new era of communication, the endless appeals to objectivity and evidence dear to the status quo of lost all weight in the world of alternative facts and fake news attempts to decipher the world through transparent metaphysics prove not only to be futile but also indefinitely destructive as a quest to know everything merely reveals all that we cannot know. Meaning is contrary to its own intent. All information inevitably crumbles into the void of illusion that Shapiro in 17. SDP's Washington Post called Trump lies. News organizations say so. This is typical of the liberal establishment during the election. Journalists keep pointing out that Trump is a liar. That may be true, but it doesn't make it support his discourse is ineffective. Trump is a candidate of media hyperreality. The transpolitical Trump is a candidate of simulation. Invoking the truth does not work. Trump is more advanced than truth. There is no truth for falsehood. There have been several simulation presidents. Trump takes place in the lane of mistake journalists. He is not to understand truth. It is not objective. This historically constructed discourse conservative true and false is epistemological a priori. His time has come and gone. Belief in truth lies embedded in Plato. Initiated metaphysics sovereign. Subject who knows and determine a fact has been betrayed. A new epistemological system transcend. True and false things of a way of avoiding dialectic meaning proliferating indefinitely obscenity that becomes their imminent finality. And simply reason when Trump says something is because Trump says it, there is nothing the New York Times can do about it. Okay, that was an adventure. Mark the card it. Nothing the New York Times can do about it. And I will resend the one I see with the card in the doc. But let me. Okay.
Okay, I just got it. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, first, there's a line where you say, here we become the commodity reduced to pure information. How does one be reduced to the commodity form?
So that's the critique that like semiotics is making of Marxist understandings of capital, in that the individual is no longer like understood at like the purpose of capital is no longer to create commodities but to create consumers for commodities, which is why they're like things are being sold that are like images and experiences and like the signification or the value of having an object.
Why does that mean that we have become the commodity?
Because the commodity is that which is like produced for the purpose of capital, and in this case the consumer is that which needs to be produced.
The consumer is produced for the purpose of capital. Okay, interesting. Why the poem?
The whole thing is a poem.
Well, you did isolate that you added a poem into the 1AC, so I think that might be a double turn. But I
paradox
think
is important for the way that we can disconnect representations from reality. No idea.
Why is it good to disconnect representations from reality?
Well, they're already disconnected.
What does that mean?
So the representative forms of things like language and like images fail to contain reality and experience, and in refusing to be like coded into representational meaning and semiotic structures, things like poetry, we are able to first disrupt the meaning making machines that would commodify labor and like situate the
commodify labor or commodify ourselves by turning us into consumers? Both? Okay, interesting. I wanted to kind of talk about that piece of evidence talking about how we're willing to die for this debate. Can you explain the relationship between the reading of the 1AC and the existence of the Black Panthers?
Yeah, so the 1AC is like in relation to like acts of insurrection and revolutionary movements in poetry and poetic language and poetic thought, like anarchism in thought anarchism of thought as opposed to in thought. So the idea is that nothing generates value without the potential of its loss, and in that way, there is no revolutionary movement that is not.
So we learned this from analyzing the Black Panthers, and that's the meaning that you've generated / non-meaning that you've generated from their existence.
Well, there are several. There are like 5 or 6 examples in that card. It talks about Che Guevara and the resistance movement.
Yeah, and they all were linked together, which is why I'm asking at the nexus point. Unless, are you saying that the Black Panthers, Che Guevara, all exist on a kind of horizontal plane without?
No, I'm sorry. The nexus of this is that like life only gains value in its proximity to death. something is only valuable if we are willing and likely to.
The Panthers were only valuable when they got in proximity to death. Okay.
No,
I'm gonna send out
the revolutionary movement is only successful. Okay, for sure.
The order is going to be 2 off and then case. Does everybody have it? Okay, do you have it?
Is it the same one in C as earlier?
Yeah.
Are there new? Okay, yeah.
If there might be case arguments, actually, I typed something, but I'm gonna have you flow it.
All right, fair enough.
All right, we all good? Looks like it. First is the white gaze, K. The affirmative is whiteness, a mastery of concealment that maintains the gaze. Vote negative to turn the gaze back and reveal the body as a Gochi entity. Innate white interlocutors deploy theory as a way of not being forced to examine aspects of their own white subject position. Whiteness is as a master of concealment embedded within responses, reactions, good intentioned postural gestures, denials, and structural and material orders. While anti-racist whites take time to get their shit together, a luxury that is a species of privileged bodies of color continue to suffer. Their bodies cry out for the political and existential urgency for the immediate undoing of the oppressive operations of whiteness. Here, the very notion of the temporal against racialized whites who deploy theory in the service of fighting against white races must caution against the seduction of white narcissism and the recentering of whiteness, and hence the process of sequestration for the real world of traumatized black bodies impacted by the operations of white power. Go to the second criticism. The 1AC represents a conquistador ontology for through the bloody elimination of native presence and the use of black flesh to carve out and shape modern cartographies. The 1NC is a return to black and indigenous shared grammars of suffering that enabled strategic political work by refusing to align with the 1AC's universal project of humanism. King in 19. Native and black grammars of suffering share urgent concern. The middle passage turns society capacity into flesh by the 1530s. Whiteness begins turning the Aztec body into Indian plus for interstellar ethical dilemmas. The genocide of grammar articulates itself within the slave grammar of accumulation and fungibility. Both of these grammars of suffering find it difficult to assume narrative form within humanism. The elaboration of grammar of suffering, the genocide of serve as a shared point of departure for organizing of women and people of color by reading Bird's notion of the Indian as a site of transit for multiple forms of imperial power alongside theories of black fungibility. Scholars can begin new grammatical and conceptual frames for thinking about black indigenous life. Soko provides an unflinching meditation on gratuitous violence. Her grammar names butchers, destroyers, and sorcerers. Soko uses harsher terms that replace settler in his origins in sentiments of reconciling, while the settler nation state continue to enact violence and disavow the return of land of reparation for slavery. Soko's grammar of violence brings indigenous and black flesh in life into the same frame. Clinton sustains a critique of Marxism, where he is no Marxist. African and other tribal people had shared food and wealth in common for thousands of years before the white man. Marx came along and stood their ideas for his communes and collective farms. White men didn't even invent communism. Clinton views Marxism as just one of the available tools that could be used in revolutionary struggle. Slaves may serve as laborers, but slave exists primarily to satisfy sexual and ego needs of the master, while black slave labor are constitutive of the political economy. The slave is essential as an object of negation for the construction of the master initiative itself. The slave is offered in death in the place of the master. Thus, the slave becomes the master if only for an instant as the slave dies. Gradually, the slave inhabits the master's idle thoughts during waking hours. The master's obsession enslaves him. The totalizing power and pull of black is on the psyche and imagination of the master of the organization of the social order requires blackness as a state of non-being. Indigenous thought that positions anti-blackness as a world-making phenomenon can consider the slave's unsolvable question. These discursive moments that interrupt humanist grammars of suffering function as disruptions to white settler colonial impulses. Baudrillard leaves unthought blackness as the nadir of the axiological system. He critiques and finds the ontological position of the savage into de-racialized specter of immaterial science rather than a genocidal encounter that bolsters humanism. We didn't need a new grammar to come to terms with social death, and Baudrillard isn't it. The lesbians in 20. What the savage reveals to Baudrillard is none other than that which De Silva states. We, the others of man, were upsetting history. Our words and deeds unleash the predicament of the modern order. Baudrillard suggests a similar truth from the position of the fractured subject position of man, elaborating the paradoxes of the capacity that bore him. The genocidal encounter of ethnology with its object of investigation reveals the paradoxes of the rest of the world. In order for its real to live, its object must die. The taste, after being hoarded into ethnological description, rooted in colonization, will be returned to the jungle to be a living museum to the past. The taste/savage reveals the simulation. In the savage, the paradoxes of science, ethnology, and the real are made to bear. The Indian thus return to the ghetto again becomes a model of simulation of all of the possible Indians from before ethnology. Where Baudrillard takes analysis all too human is in suggesting that the condition which has made the savage a savage is a condition which belongs to the sign alone and not to the materiality of severed flesh, broken necks, and unreclaimable bodies. The absurdity of Baudrillard lies in his insistence that this relation of simulation simulacra is the same for all beings across the board, because postmodernity, including but not limited to Baudrillard's own ontological capacity as wiping henceforth still long enduring typological face of humanity. In this transition from the real to the hyperreal, one can suggest that at one point there was a representation that adequately separated the Indian as Indian and Western man as Western man. Such a theory has not been read. Spillers says that sticks and stones might break our bones, but words might most certainly kill us. What one gathers in this critique is the materiality of semiotics, materiality that Baudrillard includes. Hillerton Spiller's words will most certainly kill as a reminder that language is haunted by a violence, which is the grammar and ghost of every gesture. Mark the card at gesture. Their proliferation of actually, I want to finish that card. That there can be a being for which the sign, language, nor image is not enough to render coherent or legible. Its grammar of suffering is foregone as an attempt of procuring universal entrapment is announced by Baudrillard. Incoming new non-white / non-black groups claim normal North American identity by putting distance between themselves and the black population. When Baudrillard reduced the savages' condition to hyperreality that we all must undergo, he forgets the ways in which his own ethnic class retains the overdetermined grounds for signifying its own scripted statement. He leaves on thought blackness a lockout of narrative capacity. The violence done to the slave conditions the possibilities for the actual signs and concepts which will come to set the scales in terms of legibility. We need a grammar, we need a new language of abstraction to explain this horror, which will not be found in the work or under the name of Jean Baudrillard. Their proliferation of non-meaning is not a neutral act of transgressive resistance, but it garners its incoherence for the ontological instability of blackness. Gillespie in 18, the avant-garde is only radical in a world that perpetuates and corroborates with gratuitous violence. Black aesthetics to white dadaist is not avant-garde. The very notion precludes the incapacity that constitutes slave positionality. Black aesthetics is always already constituted as antagonistic. Come on, black nihilism, rape the white girls, rape their fathers, cut the mother's throats, choke my friends with their drink spilling and restless. Black scream and chant, scream and dole, unearthly, hollering. The list of incomprehensible violence presents itself to the world as nothing other than an unprogrammable program of anti-ethics. It is a denunciation of the liberal narrative of oppression in exchange for the affirmation of the black nihilist narrative of liberal progress. It's always already prematurely predicated on the death of black bodies. Black art will always appear as nothing. Black God not only had no program, it was against all programs. That this gave the movement its explosive power to unfold in all directions. The black makes his way into art as the commodity that speaks, which itself is a counterfactual. For the commodity to make art, the world must face the concept of the paradigm that follows that rupture, and to replay the sound of the incomprehensible blackened parlance over and over again. The black artist is coerced into faking her subjectivity. Unfamiliar, uninterpretable resistance only registers as data. Since data is the only legible grammar, the anti-black world has to make sense of the black aesthetic. White artists are presupposed as art by the very fact that their subject offering an image to the world has whiteness to historically grant legitimacy. Mark the card at legitimacy. You have never been a commodity. Dean in 17. Racial capitalism has a particular intimacy with chattel slavery. The human disintegrated as the approach to black racial capitalism of the non-allegorical existence of an inhuman subject. The black Wilderson describes the exclusion of the slave from any transaction of value having no symbolic currency or material labor power to exchange. Slavery and capital's entanglement is about the subjectification of the slave. The black non-subject who are capital themselves. Black people may not literally be bought and sold, but the to be black is to be taken for granted, openly available to all. Blackness continue to embody speculative and semiotic value thirsted after by a white marketplace. The black interrupts and prevents the establishment of a human capital binary. The black is always already capital and subjecthood, travestying humanism in favor of inhuman capital without recognizing the black its historical inevitability, circularly reinforces white humanism. Now you should adopt the black native feminist posture of suspicion toward universalist reformists and tautological forms of debate competition that admire themselves within the one he sees framing of communication. King in 17. Native/indigenous decolonization and black abolition change in terms of the debate and discussion about identity of the human. Black abolitionists work in native decolonization outright refuse universalist assumptions, common sense tautologies, and profess reforms. One often encounters antagonism. The scholar committed to decolonization abolition has to refuse necropolitical epistemological system. This labor and violent confrontation in the classroom on a repeated basis can transform one's educational and professional experience into one rife with stress, anxiety, and unease. Students of color experience stress, anxiety, and unease as they confront the pressure to take up impulses to move to the post-human and native feminist politics of decolonial refuse and black feminist abolition politics of skepticism informed by distrust and animus toward the overrepresentation of the human diverge from polite communicative acts. Neither participate within the terms of the debate. They do not play by the rules of native and black feminist politics discuss large critique of both the logic of the discussion as well as the mode of communication. The break with discursive violence can change future encounters. Refusal and skepticism are modes of engagement that are uncooperative and force an impasse. Mark the card. Impasse. Go to case. What thirst are you? What death do you know and what's lost in the bedroom, in the sink? When would you desire to die? When would you see death? And explain it when they all see what they all see is their own lives, their own deaths. Why be thirsty for death? It simply rains out tears. When they say they're willing to die, they mean they like talking about black people dying as though the dead wouldn't have a real king. In 19 white scholarly projects that gesture toward or state their critical and anti-racist intent engage in acts supported troping black embodiment to aesthetize and deconstruct scholars that transform black figures in forms into captive bodies under the scholarly gaze, regardless of intentions, treated as a captured, held still, and now move body for the close, detailed, and surgical read/examination. The black body becomes a source of irresistible, destructive sensuality. The active traits of the contours of black bodies, black literature, expression, sound, and prose can be a physically and intellectually and emotionally gratifying experience. I can do so many things with/to blackness that many ways that white and non-black scholars produce themselves through capturing, producing the black sensual and sexual captive objects of study remains untaught in contemporary critical theories. Racial differences in sexually charged place. When this former student emailed me, I would want her to consider the ways that racialized erotics shape her intellectual project. Mark card at project. This is why I don't read one in Z's.
Okay. Oh, let me grab a timer.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right, open for cross.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What is like the human?
What is the human? We think that the human is an axiological sign that was forged through the destruction and genocide of Native peoples, as well as the enslavement of Black peoples, to generate a notion of what self is. We don't think that the human is like a thing. We think that it's an invented category.
Okay. Are there non-invented categories?
Are there non-invented categories? We think so. Our argument is that there's not really a distinction between invention and non-invention, similar with meaning and non-meaning, that the line that is forged there is through genocide rather than a kind of articulability, meaning that like if I were to explain that there was like things that are non-invented, it usually circulates through a kind of appropriation and dispossession of indigenous stories, ideas, politics, same with Blackness, which is what our critique of your evidence is.
Gotcha. The you've never been a commodity card.
Yeah.
Can you, like, I guess I'm reading the evidence and I'm a little bit confused in terms of like.
You have made an argument as to how semiotics is the kind of production of people as consumers is kind of the new way that we understand ourselves as commodities. We've made the argument that that commodity form has never been inscribed on those that are non-Black, and rather that Blackness kind of situates what we think as being commodity, right? Hence why the affirmative utilizes several examples of like, you know, the figure of the Muslim, right, in your Shapiro evidence, or the kind of willingness to die as different ways to theorize about oneself as a slave to the system when one is simply, when one is not a slave to any other.
Okay, so this like figuration. Okay, so primary antagonism. That makes okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at. Yeah, that makes sense. So the alternative.
Mm-hmm.
You need one of your link cards says that we need a new grammar to understand Black suffering.
Yeah.
How does unmaking the self generate new grammars?
How does unmaking this? Which card is this referring to?
The King evidence says your alternative is to unmake the self, and the first card says.
Yeah, so we think that there are grammars of humanism that authorize the idea of a self, an individual, a kind of I at the heart of like our theories, our understandings of the world, etc., and that utilizing a kind of grammar of genocide and fungibility forces us to tarry with the ways in which Black people and Native people are not afforded a self, that we traffic in the world in opposition to whiteness, the ways in which white selves conceive themselves through the elimination of Black people and the kind of imposition of what it means to be, you know, like a person or a human onto them after already enslaving them. Hence why we say that Blackness is framed as being sort of a living library, right? Something to experiment with and to theorize about.
Sure. I'm gonna send the 2AC. It's gonna be case, the pick, and then the K.
Woodrow, here's what we'll do. Not a 1 hour, but the 2 and C can be 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay. I'll take it.
Get that one extra minute. A lot of sparkly things can happen in that 1 minute.
I have an idea for what that sparkly thing about it be, so I'll take it.
Okay.
Okay, the Tracy should be sent. Thumbs up if people have doc. Cool. Great. Doors closed. Kudra, are you? Cool. Where did my 2AC go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Is anybody not ready?
Could you give the roadmap?
Yeah, for sure. Case, the pick, and then the K.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry, I'm just a floating voice that pops in every now and again, but that made me smile because y'all weren't asking for roadmaps day 1, day 2, or day 3. Now y'all all assertive. Can you give us the roadmap? Yes. Like Luke Coppin, yes. Roadmap, yes. I'm gone now. I'm just proud. I'm getting vibes. Yes, celebration.
Good vibes. All right. Welcome to the information age. You can pick up your key card at the virtualization help desk. Check your subject hood at the door. There are only consumers here. Everything has been rendered fungible by semio-capitalism. Rise through the ranks and you'll be granted access to our sovereign power upgrade package so you can manipulate our management grid from a coveted position of selected stability. For an earth-shattering 10 cents an hour, you have been granted the privilege of thinking about, talking about, and conforming to the will of sovereign liberal democracy. Water policy. The political economy of the sun is the impact filter for every argument they have made, and absent a competing interpretation for how the world functions, they cannot win this debate. Power no longer operates through the production of labor, but rather the consumption of science and the neutralization of resistance. Water has lost its referent, much like all other signs and signifiers. Instead, this debate should be centered around death, which in terms of the 1AC means mystery, non-knowledge, decomposition, and unpredictability. The question you must ask yourself is, why do we run from death? Securitize it and attempt to stave off deathly forces of decomposition, or do we open ourselves up to a destabilization of normative subjectivity? Debate itself has become irredeemable because it is premised on the eradication of all uncertainty within this community, causing a global civil war of which debate is only one front. In this space, all that is mysterious and unknowable must be militated against. With this in mind, the role of the judge is to will an event, accept the inherently wounded nature of the resolution, and debate is a way to resist the codification of language. Our poetic annulment of language refuses to transcribe the world through dialectic opposition of life versus death, and injects death into our research methodology as something that cannot be transcribed to create symbolic exchange that maxes out value to life in this space by making the ballot an orientation to the university that refuses to breathe life into a system that does so much violence. We can protest and advocate, we can create coalitions, but we cannot create change. There are two impacts of versus permissive individualism of politics in which we can resist, but only so much, and only as we are allowed by power. Politics has become impossible to articulate when it's posed in terms of an intelligible identity. The Black Lives Matter movement emerged in response to Ferguson, but was drowned out by All Lives Matter from white activists who brutally pave over the anti-Black violence in America. Facebook is dominated by calls to transform feminism into egalitarianism. This isn't just co-option, but an inbuilt mechanism that assumes all resistance politics use the register of identity are subsumed by the universalization of the consumer as subject. You become the client that's served, addressed, and set away. Second impact is cruel attachments, the need to premise value on action on movements and our ability to interrogate psychic relations within a debate space that is figured as a site for change, a site where it's safe to produce new grammars is ultimately a hollow hope which will only terminate in result to modern denies value to life. The line by line. Where did it go? Oh. The evidence that was read in the line by line fundamentally denies the explanation given by the Luke evidence, which is kind of important in this debate because the Luke evidence has two primary claims. The first is that ontology is no longer descriptive in a world where metaphysics has been discarded by structures of power. That structuring system of metaphysics is essential to the functioning of ontological systems, but in a world where those things no longer exist, we have to understand the world through hyper-ontology, which is one that operates along the grid of power that Luke describes. This is the second answer. The idea that we're only talking about Black folks dying requires an understanding of power that doesn't just code identity via algorithms. The idea that we are reducible to points of data on a grid and that those points can be moved by power, but otherwise they are locked in place, which is also an answer to the Baudrillard indictment, because it says that Baudrillard leaves blackness unthought. But this is why we read the Luke evidence, because we're not saying that semiotics implicates all people the same way, but rather that the grid locks individuals into place as to be produced as consumers and to move the cogs of semio-capitalism along, but not necessarily in the same place. And that kind of staticism is what allows us to be figured as commodities, which is why the semiotic disruption of the U1AC is essential for the ability of the project of the critique to succeed in the pay. Permutation to both, the idea that they can pick and choose parts of the 1AC to reject and endorse is just another form of the imposition of meaning and reality onto all spaces, which is, results in violence via an ordering function that our AF has turned. The argument that the AF can only be good if bits and pieces were removed destroys the sense of radical alterity and illusion that is necessary for solvency. This means that not only does the pick link to all of our offense that I just explained in the case today, but also can't solve any of our AF perm to the pick, add our form to their content participation DA. Excuse me. The form of their argument, its objective diagnosis, penchant for positivist historical analysis, as well as truth guarantees that the legitimate policy debate is an allegedly radical safety valve for the insulation of liberal civil society. They criticize and maintain the semiotic fantasy of liberation in this activity while alienating the very real material exploitation necessary to make this space possible at Galloway and Seven. Baudrillard present the expression of studying drives the very facilitation of the drives new control spaces. They did it, but they wanted it that we reveal how ideology and reification operated into neoliberalism, one place full for the other, progressive, moral, horizon will experience the cycle of achievement always with the folly of the social. Not material change, but only minor enough to pitch the theory to social progressive negated. Our reaction political project was a moral product ability and developing necessary mechanisms and infrastructure required to heal and grow. All sides unified together, progressive things, life reaction to the other. The end result of the current state of affairs, oil company that is green and world bathed in blood, but devoted to peace, activist rise or rally against global warming, tends to grow with the physical base of praise. Automobile contraption that creates the condition possibility to smell even not practically insurmountable. Like the computer, the heart of the planetary is the host score binary, the offer and all, and the opposite the option as far as nothing is reified in material reality all spins into oblivion as a separative cause operated this development assertion the genesis linked of the negation same claim to abandonment of blindness in the realm of real material commitment. The term is simply real occasions, real human worlds allowing them to be, and for it is a telos of the terabyte that terraforms our potential to breathe and create poetry amid the chaos of existence, asserting its existence through the automation of all forms of life in order to propose all that does not fit neatly into its cruel ebb and flow that's BFO in 19. The installation of algorithm interrupts the continuous simplification as semiosphere is a reformatted according to algorithm breathing is distributed poetry from the earth leads to the discovery of many new imaginations, new possibilities. Economic productivity, which creates the conditions for more just world, affords the technical apparatus and social groups controlling disproportionate advantage of the vast population, not just state of society, powerless and pliable, and massive increase the quantity of goods allocated to the law of false universality under capital accumulation to produce diversity of cultural life, rule of financial valorization. Actually, the global market is only a universal value less than we get the neoliberal to give regulation led to destruction of moral principle and self-personality of life, the difference in strangling us in the turbulent self-destruction to reach its peak. The not type of colonial violence cannot be lived without traumas because the new anti-political framework, the political decision be replaced by the automatic governance. The very tools enable the expansion of rationality, human control of human life to distraction, living in war can only be found inside the ice walls, citadel of reason decay. I'm actually, okay. Capitalism now operates through the algorithm permeating our unconscious as we reproduce its violent logic, calculation, abstraction, only analysis that understands this is capable of recontextualizing political strategy and generating new grammars via the unthinking of psychic externalities as Ballard 18. Computational capitalism is free culture, recognized contemporary culture around the actual electron, digital computing, thinking numbers, and penetration, the digital branding, the brutal, and the precise the management of the cars that holds enslaved with as far as economic concepts, legends, and middle passage, leaves the center turn computational cars down to depend on all productive activity, the law will allow us to pursue this price and quality that is the structural inequalities, endemic to capitalist production, how do we appear in the variance of signs of race, class, generation, distributed computations, integration, the national parts of totality, so part of the standard, the nominal societies will whole become fast on automaton project with habits and social concept that further from computation interface from machine to local place, how they replicate as a big subject, a small subject, and you too little artificial intelligence, and semiotic mediation, their focus on the damaged Black body to be rehabilitated ignores that. The Black has become look at overcame warrior narratives of oppressive crime function as semiotic capital, which agrees the wheels of racial neoliberalism. That's James of 15. Overcoming the invisible and moral becoming affect the labor productive pieces of the public performance like overcoming the land subject acts according to Sean White's landscape fiction and object objectification that impediment poses a person subjectivity and recognition being looked at as resource relating sort of objectification to mean subjectivity overcoming more profitable than objectification feeds therefore they're creating a therapeutic narrative our prohibition over the overcoming the precious picture once we answers subjective resilience proof of goodness the resilient fact number women who contrast fragility of their willing use to reinforce class distinctions brown women using brown men discussion Muslim feeling social poverty always serious areas such as play resilience of overcoming by recycling objectification into overcoming the profit mother's resilience and whoa. This means there's a very easy permutation to be made as our analysis of computational capitalism and that benefit of the alternative and we are winning. Their theory of power explains their violence is the best. Poetry, so permutation, I'm gonna skip to permutation of the Athene alt novel other instances even if they win the K all we have to do is prove sufficiently the purposes around to be accelerate the form of debate toward its demise and to create disruptive forms of poetic thought perm do both you should over identify with the form of the perm through a strategy of immigrant hyperconformity the links are not intrinsic they link to the status quo double bind either the perm solves the K or the alternative doesn't. Poetry is always an access of language resisting its symbolic debt. Thus, the acts disruption born of language of the resolution works towards finding social life beyond the scope of legality of governance as Moten in 18. The future of the outlaw, the impossible domestic to disrupt the ordinary force of the various choreographic refusal, smell of execution guarantees the difference between the refusal and march of the characters of animism of what Robinson calls ontological totality, black and presence, so making the odd pieces of imagining things. At stake, rather, there's a question of sociality being escaped. It's about recognizing the decision creates regular situation of being created and exists only in response to everyday interruption, imagining things, the anarchist sorcery of the facts, it calls being into cuts it. Speed elitism, the transparent speed elitist university is the new manifestation of anthropology that wants to know black people in order to figure out how to destroy them better. The injunction to know oneself by race in the academy plays in the modes of capitalist objectification whereby the other becomes a commodity quickly traded on the market of debate. Now we have black studies whose research is appropriated in order to reduce the radical alternative black folks to be marketable difference. It's the same logic as always, just marketed differently. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, are you ready? That's definitely a no.
No, I'm ready. I forgot that cross-X is happening. Oh wait, my computer isn't charging.
You forgot I have to ask you questions?
I'm not used to it's been a really long time since I did LD. And I forgot what it's like not to have a partner doing things for me.
Fair enough. I kind of miss it like that. But are you good?
Yeah, I'm ready.
The Luke evidence that you extend, you say that ontology is no longer descriptive. What is the difference between hyperontology and ontology at the level of description, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. So ontology relies on conceptions of Enlightenment era metaphysics.
I know what those things are. I need to know the differential that you're applying.
For sure. So we no longer make decisions via metaphysics, we make them via algorithms. Everything's been reduced to data points. And so in a world where metaphysics no longer implicates decision making, ontology no longer describes reality, whereas the way that power is made is almost completely automated at this point. There's an illusion of power, there's a face of power, but there isn't a actual system of decision making. Rather, we've kind of fallen into listening to and following along behind. It's like Weekend at Bernie's. They're propping up the dead corpse of power and decision making, but they're.
Do you think that really makes sense to yourself?
Yes, I do. Well, as much sense as anything can make in a world where meaning is illusory.
Okay, so the kind of that kind of goes into what I want to ask about next, which is this kind of Moten argument. It's talking about fugitive, outlaw, impossible domestic, theorizing through Black radicalism. I kind of want to know how then the affirmative traffics into Blackness then. Is Blackness just everywhere? Does everyone have access to it? Did your poem do that? Did you just become Black?
No. So the Moten evidence is about the ways in which, okay, so there are kind of two pieces to it. The first is that the mechanism of the 1AC is a strategy. So this argument is basically that the strategy is already in resistance, is already in excess, excuse me, and that this is something that is viable for
for whom?
It's a permutation for Black folks.
Oh, you're doing this for me. Okay, I get it. So the argument then is that you're doing good things for Black people?
No, it's a
By reading your poem? How so?
No, the argument is a permutation. It's that we can do both. They're not mutually exclusive.
Okay, can you explain to me what the world of the permutation actually looks like then?
Yeah, that we unthink in a radical grammar.
What does that do for Black people?
Well, for me to prescribe what that would look like in any particular instance would be
I didn't ask you to prescribe. I just want to know how it actually is helpful for Black people.
How it's helpful? Well, I think that using poetics as a mechanism to develop grammars is the way that we escape the links to things like the academy, the speedily doesn't
So poetics allows us to escape linkages to the academy, and that does something for Black people living where?
What do you mean living where? I mean, the James evidence is pretty specific. It talks about like particularly the way that semiotics is mobilized against African American women in the United States, Muslim individuals. I don't know if that's in the United States.
Okay, so you do good things for those damaged Black bodies through your poetry. Okay, interesting.
No, we present a strategy to disrupt systems of power that are constantly like genociding groups of people.
Genocide. That's the first time I heard that in this speech. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit of prep. Uh, 642. Since I do not have a full negative block, we're just going to have a really, really fun, messy 2 and C because my doc is not really in order. So the order is like a little weird, IMO, because like I don't have a neck block. But it's gonna be like the case and then the pick and then the K. But they're low key just gonna become the same argument. So like I might flow straight down if I were, and don't do it. I'll make it make sense. Okay. Okay, actually, sorry. This is a weird block. So I need y'all to get like a new sheet, actually, and that's going to be like an overview that will be cross-applied throughout the rest of the debate, but it stems from the K. Okay. Are we all good?
No, I don't have paper.
Well, that's not my fault.
You the one talking about a new sheet.
Okay, figure something out.
Give me a sheet of your paper.
Yeah, I'll just walk over.
Please do.
All right. You can just listen. The arguments will make sense. Okay, are we all good? Bet. Each 2AC argument assumes the nature of debate, speech, communication, but not the nature of the people that are within this activity, what they do, what they think, why they abuse others. There's a process of recursion, the capacity to slow down and notice the self at the heart of one's theory, the cultivation of white history that bring you in closer proximity to the law through a language of consent, seduction, and non-consent, which is not afforded to Black people. The implication being that semiotics communication are not the underlying influence for political or individual-evaded violence. This is the flesh of the speaker themselves. There is no structural way for them to evade or subvert anything with meaning, because anything we say and do can get the police to knock down on our doors at the request of white people. We are made responsible for white people's speech without the capacity to contest it, which means that this operates at the level of porter tripping. I'm actually not going to go to the case, but instead I'm going to go to the pick first. Not really going for the alternative argument. However, I'm going to impact on both of the argument that they go for against it. First is the argument that links with the app. Since I'm not going for it, we get shielded from it, but it is a pick out of you, not the content or the form of the affirmative, which means that you are kind of aligning the argument that we're making with that, antagonizing the ways in which you are understanding the debate. Understanding the debate is good. Cross-examination are multiple examples of this, i.e. the ways in which we kind of utilize cross-examination as a poetic intervention upon your ability to understand and conceptualize your own theory is a form of alternative solvency that can also be kind of added to the alternative of refusal that I'm going for. But we're also impacting the Galloway evidence. We're impacting the Galloway evidence. The point of the argument isn't that debate. The argument that I'm going for isn't that debate is safe, but that it's good to antagonize white people for seemingly neutral acts of speech, i.e. the argument that I made above as to how Black people can simply be doing things like jog somewhere and still get called by and get the police called on them. It's because the kind of communicative access that white people have to reality is one that is shaped through genocide and accumulation, which we explain how the came more, but it also acts as a dissent insofar as they kind of misscript the interpersonal relationality of the critique as a fantasy of liberation. No, it is not operating at the level of structure. It is operating at the level of how we relate to one another, which you attempt to continually detach yourself from, which is exactly why the communication offense is not responsive. Go to the case debate. Porn and tripping turns information dichotomies and algorithmic divisions of knowledge because it operates at the level of interpersonal relations that cannot be scripted along a grid. They continually give examples of Black people without giving any texture to them. Regardless of that texture, it's bad because it attempts to translate Blackness into mediations of meaning and non-meaning for the legibility of white supremacy, i.e. the way in which they describe the Black Lives Matter movement does not make any sense insofar as it allies the ways in which interpersonal relations at those protests script the ability for Black people to be agents or not. The fact that we had to protect white people at those protests is another example that they script along as a form of communicative capitalism. No, it does not operate at the level of form, but rather the ways in which white flesh dictates what types of politics we're able to conceptualize, which also flips any sort of transparency or knowledge of the world into a mastery of Blackness by their own linguistic determinism. The example is the revolutionary suicide argument from the what is here. You are not willing to die for this debate, metaphorically or not. Think of how they present the Black Panthers and their evidence. Bobby Hutton didn't choose to explode the boundaries of himself. The Panther didn't endorse death as a sacrifice for the institution. Bobby Hutton's death was transformative through grief. It resonated through the Panthers. It affected confidence. It generated rage. Subsequent shootouts and subversion only left people with mental trauma and grief. The point is that the Black revolutionary doomed, regardless of whether they resist or not. It's not a question of whether or not life is valuable only in relationship to death, because for Black people, we are always already dead. It's that you have to theorize through Blackness as a way to generate strategic confidence. The problem isn't that you are not willing to die. It's that you proliferate hope for revolutionary agency by endorsing failed strategies that have already put us closer to death and caused more grief in our communities. It is romantic seduction that packages representational value into Blackness through one's interpersonal desire to aspire to being Black, i.e. the kind of reading of modern evidence in The 2AC on the K all prove that K is just a white woman who wants to feel radical by utilizing instances of indigenous and black radicality as a way to feel more radical, to feel like that anarchism was actually doing something, when in reality you were just saying words. You aren't willing to die, but instead you put niggas' lives on the line by exposing militancy, proliferating black radicality, etc., and then covering your butt with linguistic plays, which makes black movements, black families, black dudes more susceptible to state repression, and results in turning to liberalism for protection by the police. It also turns your offense at several layers. I already explained the kind of ways in which it results in individuation, i.e. it proves that their semiotic interruption doesn't operate at the level of form, but constituting a self who can feel radical, feel like they have done something by saying something, by reading poetry, framing the 1AC as poetry, exposing meaning, non-meaning, etc., as being a radical imposition on the system. Our argument is that that imposition does not become radical. Rather, it kind of recomposes makes the system stronger. The example is debate, right? Reading these types of arguments only makes debate, or it only makes things like the PRL pop up. It makes exclusive policy around Robbins. But the problem is that Black people in debate are then treated in relationship to these arguments as being the texture or being the commodity that is then used to generate solvency, to generate uniqueness claims, etc. And then we are surveilled instead, which means you are not making any change. You are not destroying debate. You are not destroying the kind of nature of systems or communication, but rather shifting the nature of surveillance onto Black and Indigenous peoples as flesh, which will kind of already explain that above. Now, the poem begs the question of why thirst for death. The inattentiveness and misunderstanding of several arguments from the 1AC demonstrates a Black insurgent mode of communication which absorbs their offense from the mode and evidence and turns out a form of Black social life that can layer against and seethe between the lines of the 1AC by embracing social death. It generates a form of strategic planning that erases and eradicates the potential to be trailed. There was no permutation argument made, plus it was a critique of their identification with death, which means that they're not able to cover resolve any of this offense. It means that we solve the entirety of the 1AC and means I can go for it in the 2 and R without having any sort of other offense. They say that everything has been rendered fungible by semio-capitalism, which means that they understand the commodification of the self through the manipulation of labor. Our argument is that the destruction, violation, and NATO alienation of the slave from the political community is what determines what it means to be a commodity in the first place. We don't need to win a counter theory of signs or signifiers, but rather what types of grammars become empty signifiers that the 1AC appropriates. And their desire for us to embrace that. The permissive individualism argument was already turned above when we made the argument about Black Lives Matter, i.e. the way that you understand those systems is to racialize them, i.e. utilize identitarian critiques of, i.e. critique identitarianism, and then script that as a way to understand semiotics at the level of commodification, i.e. saying that we are all commodified when it is only Black people at the protest who actually get to feel the impetus of the commodification through tear gas and rubber bullets. Go to the K. I already did a lot of work on the line, but I've already done a lot of work on the line by line, so I shouldn't have to reinscribe the argument. I'm just simply going to start with the link debate, which is also going to be the kind of ontology offense. The grammar of conquest renders the notion of agentive capacity incoherent through the bloody erasure of Black and Native presence. Genocide establishes the boundaries of the political, demarcating the distinction between form and content through a bloody trail martyr that generates a savage as a fleshly resource for theorization about the self. Extended Gillespie evidence and historical devastation by which the economy of science and signifiers generates materiality, and second devastation operates through asymmetrical religion. The fourth, what he sees moves to prioritize information through an economy of dialectics, i.e. the contestation between what is true and false represents itself through the antagonism between indigenous conception of the real and the settlers' need to expand, which is exemplified in the erasure and appropriation of racial thought to inform the capacity to understand the positionality of the settler. I've given multiple examples above, but there are more. That's why Shapiro is willing to say that mental images invoked by Trump of Muslims celebrating 9/11 is more real than reality itself. It's because the figure of the racialized Muslim is necessary to satisfy the notion of the self within the settler, trafficked through Western imperialism, which can only be understood through a self-referential gaze, which becomes material through a libidinal identification with semiotics over material scripts of the flesh. It means that they're not able to really access any of their theorization. Often so the case of it, especially their argument about how ontology has changed to hyper-ontology. No, our argument is that your ability to kind of identify with those systems while utilizing Blackness and indigeneity as the kind of texturing for those theorizations is exactly why the kind of the intervention has to operate at the level of interpersonal relations and the kind of grammars that we use to situate ourselves within this world, which are mediated by reflections of racialization. I'll do some more of the line by line. The capitalism operates through algorithm argument was answered above by the semio-capitalism turn, i.e. the argument that blackness operates through native alienation. We are not commodities because we are consumers. It is instead because Black flesh is consumed at the level of desire. It means that you're kind of algorithmic. Our algorithms arguments doesn't presuppose the reason why we choose to buy things from certain algorithms, because there's an economy of desire that dictates certain forms of negativity, indigenous thought, etc., as being valuable only when it can be made something that is So only when utility can be inscribed upon it. Now, the semiotic mediation argument is a double term with the modern evidence because it generates categories of resilience that are leveraged on Black folk, but we don't link to it because our argument is not that you should recognize Black and Indigenous peoples as flesh and not recognize Black and Indigenous people for overcoming, but rather that the alternative is able to kind of disfigure the meaning and non-meaning that is attached to Black people. I'll explain that in a second. The poetry good argument was answered on the case debate. The speed elitism just doesn't make any sense insofar as the alternative is not a kind of turn to academic thought, but rather is not in terms of academic thought, but leveraging fungibility and genocide as grammars that twist and escape meaning within contemporary symbolics is strategically plan and negotiate politics between Black and Native people, which means that you haven't really understood the kind of ability to create interracial solidarity that is not understandable by white people. The illegibility offense for the alternative means that we can sufficiently pick out of all their offense insofar as the net dynamics of grammars of suffering cannot be articulated normatively under the framework of Western grammars of communication and non-communication. If we win our link offense, it means that you have zero game of the alternative, but they're also behind because we're winning a form critique of the form content distinction, what they're tacitly ignoring, which is that the form of debate operates on a level that's not merely semiotic, but mediated by racial antagonisms that exist and precede language, i.e., which also dictates how the affirmative is taken up, i.e., how it creates a form of resentment against non-meaning that is trafficked as frustration and rage towards Black and Indigenous people's speech acts, which the affirmative and policy debate alike frame as inherently identitarian and not communicative, which then is instrumentalized as a means of excluding us while engaging with the substance or content of arguments performed by Baudrillard debaters. It means I don't even need to explain what the alternative does to essentially do the exact same thing as the affirmative that the affirmative is trying to do, but we're doing it better, considering that their opposition to form, language, meaning, etc., does the same work counterinsurgency does against Black and Indigenous folk while using and appropriating grammars of Western meaning, such as competition, permutations, education, etc., to point the police in our direction, which is a reason why they don't get the permutation.
Process?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I have no idea where my, oh, here it is. Okay, the alternative creates a form of solidarity between Black and Indigenous groups.
I mean, I don't think that you can like create solidarity. I think that it happens, but like, sure, if that's how you understand it as a white person.
So,
if you think that's about creation.
Sorry?
If you think that's about creating things, if that's the value statement that you inscribe onto it.
Okay, so to avoid inscribing value onto it, how would you describe?
I don't have to avoid anything. The point of reading this through grammars of genocide and fungibility is that there is no escape from that instrumentality, but there is a way for us to utilize those grammars to kind of change the way that sorry, I'm tired. Change the way that those Western grammars are listed when we speak to one another, right? Which is why the ways in which we describe the alternative can be taken up by white people as being a sort of value statement, but the ways in which it traffics between Black and Native people is not. Which means that we, solve the AF and also solve our own offenses and net benefit.
Was the poetry like a separate piece of off case, or was it attached to something?
It's on case.
It's on case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is okay? So, sorry.
What's up?
Got super sucked into my flow.
Oh, sure.
So the idea that there is no like mechanism of scripting, is that in relation to like the ability to script via grammars that are like generated, or the ability to script via like other things?
I don't know what you're asking about, like genuinely. What do you mean?
Very fair. So on the top of the case flow, you made a porno tripping argument, and then you said something about like something cannot be scripted, and I lost whatever the
I don't think that I said that something cannot be scripted, but that the kind of ways in which you encounter Blackness and indigeneity are by scripting forms of value onto it, and then trafficking that into your understandings of anarchism, communism, resistance, etc. Right? But our argument is that meaning and non-meaning cannot be like properly understood from the vantage point of whiteness. It can only be understood as a kind of theoretical supplement.
Okay. So what does it mean to understand like anything? Like what is the bright line?
That's a question you have to answer, right? Because we have not made a claim that understanding is like a universal thing that we could do. We've actually made the opposite, which is that the way that we understand each other, the way that meaning traffics, etc., changes at the level of interpersonal relationality, right? Which is our theory of the libidinal economy, desire, etc., rather than through any kind of systemic grid, like system, institution, etc., right? It's not prefigured. You are a real person.
Oh, can't be scripted. I see what I did on the flow now. Yeah, okay, cool.
There you go. Yeah, basis of the argument is that you are a person. That's bad.
Wow, yeah. All right, I'm gonna take prep Okay. 4:45 remaining. The order. Hold on. My flows got pretty messed up. So the case overview, framing stuff, the pick. And then the K. Case, overview, and framing, pick, and then the K.
Yo, kids, stop bullying me on Discord.
Y'all stop bullying my best friend on Discord. Whoever posted that picture, delete that.
Yeah, for real. I wonder who it was. Dang.
I feel like I'm missing some kind of discourse, and I have no idea.
It's not discourse. It's just that my face is a good meme.
Oh my god, that is not a flattering picture of me. All right. I see it. It's fine.
Well, I hate Zoom. I can't look pretty on here.
I realized when I looked back at one of my rounds that when they recorded them, that during prep, it just stayed on the face of the last person who had been, oh, that's not good. On the last person who'd been talking, so there was like 5 straight minutes of me just like staring intently into my camera. And I don't really like that that's just on the internet forever, but like.
That's so stressing, and I don't know why you just tuned in so many people to being able to find that video.
Oh no! Oh my god.
So we're gonna,
okay.
Yeah, kids. After this debate, because you have to flow. Search that video and please put it in the Discord. Please.
Don't do that.
Please.
Anyway, I'm gonna.
Because somebody already travestied that.
Where did the 1AR go? Who knows? Demo. There we go. All right. Is anybody not ready? Cool. I feel like my computer is. Water has lost its reference. All of the I'm going to try that again. Water has lost its referent as of all signs and signifiers. The idea that the world is knowable or reducible to representations is the way in which institutions attempt to cohere reality. This is the process of linguistic overdeterminism, which says that there are knowable and clear, transparent, and elucidating ways in which we can understand the world. We can see the truth. We can see what is truer than true. But the reality is that there is no reality. There is nothing behind the illusion of power, the illusion of language, the illusion of representations. In reality, we are living in a simulation. Power and subjecthood and identity and capital and violence can no longer be understood via ontology in a simulation which no longer uses metaphysics in the process of decision making. Instead, hyper-ontology explains a grid of relations that power has fixed individuals into that renders them consumers and renders them fungible. The decision-making process is functionally automated, and the individual is reduced to code, to numbers on a screen, in a desperate need to maintain the illusion of power. A couple key things that I'm gonna do on the framing page. The first is this distinction between ontological understandings that rely on metaphysics. This requires a form of decision making that is no longer used by systems of power that are in control of the transnational system of financial capital and globalization and the information exchange, the virtual economy. These things are all mediated by algorithms, code, and tech platforms, and these things are not making decisions by metaphysics. So the decision making, I'm repeating myself. Anyway, next is the libidinal economy, which has to operate through language. The libidinal economy comes from psychoanalysis, which operates via the middle stage, or the mirror stage, which says that that's the subject's introduction into language, linguistic, and semiotic process, then overdetermined subject formation via my opponent's own authors, which means that it's try or die for a framing, which incorporates their own understanding while updating it to be applicable to the to late stage virtualized capitalism. Next is poetry is a strategy. It's not like an overdeterministic understanding or relation. It's one way that we presented to disrupt our representations, which Kudra has proven is compatible with the alternative due to the poetry that was read on case, which means that the permutation has to solve. There are different kinds of poetry, different relationalities of poetry, different grammars that poetry might operate through, but the form of poetry remains the same, and that form is what the permutation is. A grammar that must reject grammar or be trapped in the grid, something that requires the semiotic analysis of the affirmative solves the alt case. So on the line by line, they basically say the value is scripted. Nothing can actually be understood, but the way that that's how representations fail to contain reality, right? If language is something that is not generative of actual meaning, but rather the illusion of meaning, then the scripting of value has to occur by an elusive process that has to be disrupted by a poetry. In addition, the way that value is scripted onto individuals operates via this grid, and the grid has to be disrupted. Again, I'm repeating myself. Next is the idea that Black Lives Matter is can be reduced to texture, something that can be added or not described or understood in terms of relationality is exactly, it's proof that the language is reductive, that nobody understands anything, that debate is not a site for the transmission of experiences or the creation of socialities, because representations fail to contain reality, because this is a discursive space, because we are throwing words back and forth at each other, sending each other speech docs, that information is dissuasive, and that we are not changing our minds. We are arguing with each other for the purpose of producing something at the end. This is a critique of discursive spaces. We're arguing that the way that grammar operates in the status quo is one that is not conducive to producing anything except a reinstantiation of the power that already exists. And the idea that something might feel radical assumes that the 1AC had radical potential in the first place, but the critique of the discursive and potential of this space is the entire point. I don't feel like a good person, and this is also the answer to the pick, which is picking out of me as a person. The role of the ballot is not to vote for me or to vote for my poetry, it is to will an event. The judge is, well, I should probably extend that, right? That seems important. To will an event, accept the inherently wounded nature of the resolution. Debate as a way to resist the codification of death. Our poetic annulment of language refuses to transcribe the world through the dialectic opposition of life versus death, which is also a reason why the link arguments on the K don't make sense, because we haven't created a figure of the human or something that is going to be reclaimed. We have critiqued the idea that language can be used to describe these things at all. The ballot is not a referendum on something that has been done correctly or a kind of grammar. It is something that refuses to transcribe the world in the first place. And the critique proper. We've argued that the system of interpersonal relations that the negative is described is something that is still mediated by languages, which is proven by the fact that the libidinal economy functions via psychoanalytic understanding, which requires the mirror stage and lack, etc. For the subject's introduction into existence. Next is that blackness is not ontological. It's semiotic, proven by the middle passage. The notion of blackness was something incomparable before the slave trade proves that blackness is not something ontological, but rather that blackness, whiteness are sustained through systems and regimes of signifiers and tropes. The belief that the ability to diagnose black suffering ignores the resignification of social death is what causes the impact. You need to prioritize form over content, even if blackness is ontological. In the way we articulate these things are situated through and determined by a capitalist information exchange, which justifies permutation to both at our form to their content, and the recrimination DA. Their investment into debate is capable of producing any kind of designifying grammars turns black bodies into fungible objects that sustain the fantasy of being a true revolutionary. This turns the gratuitous violence of these things become tools for ballots, and we solve their impact. Our disavowal of the will to transparency solves the reasons why colonizers thought to explore in the first place. Finally, is the performance, yet the absence of damage suffered in relation to black and brown bodies as to ascend to a kind of liberal humanism, or not, in this case, agency. In the digital age, capitalism has reached its material end and has turned to commodifying and recycling waste modernity.
Okay, y'all. I will take the remaining things. They're called.
Your remaining prep time, Dusty?
No, I'm taking prep. Leave me alone. I'm taking prep. Starting now. I'm tired. I'm gonna end prep early. Well, that doesn't matter. Yeah. The order is gonna be the case, and then kind of the K, but not really. You'll see. It'll make sense in a second. Are we all good? Fantastic. Why quench your thirst with death? The tears keep streaming down and you desire it for what? When the tears didn't leak in the bedroom, when it flowed down onto my cousin's chest, onto your cousin's chest, whose chest? What rapture was it to be alive and be thought of as a resource? I walk around wanting to cry but hide my tears. Why does Kate want to drink those tears? Capitalism made her do it, made her feel like a machine to the slave to the machine, witnessing tear gas and rubber bullets raining on white protesters. And I could imagine only what was it like to be a slave to the movements of white anarchists, liberals, and bored people in a pandemic, a commodity for white people chasing the thrill of death. The question of the debate is not the formal content of the poetry, but rather the flesh of the speaker. Why are you even thinking of voting affirmative when the majority of the 2 and C would drop? When the winning arcs had a variety of arguments where they explained the links to the negative and also dropped a ton of double turns. The reason why is that because the nature of debate allows white people to stomp on, ignore, and partition their own meanings onto black flesh, but they have conceded that the failure to engage with the poem is a form of strategic illegibility that generates performative solvency. It allows black people to generate forms of black social life, fugitivity, etc. in the open. It disfigures the capacity for meaning and non-meaning to be ascribed through universalist notion on the black flesh to the speaker, etc. Because the transmission of meaning purely relies on how our flesh traffics, how it enables a response or criticism, not of the 1AC but of Kate. There is no risk of reputation if I win any offense against Kate's performance or even existence within this debate, because the argument is that you cannot combine them together. It is not the argument is that you cannot combine them together. Obviously, there will be a world where Kate and I exist after this debate, but the argument, but that is not something to affirm. Our argument is that our argument is that the poetry should be affirmed of, and so not in terms of any of the meaning that it generates, in terms of the value, and in terms of anything that you can possibly know, but rather the ways in which it allows me to kind of interrogate and antagonize the movements of Kate within this debate. You have dropped every single example of porn tripping for the 2 and C, which is moved to distance oneself from the perpetuation of anti-blackness by lobbying a critique of the system. Remember our argument that the debate has gotten more structurally antagonistic to black folk. This is why the subsequent modality and utilization of black flesh as the source of fear theorizing turned the cameras and surveillance towards how to strategically incorporate and eliminate black people from the activity. Those were the examples of the PRL, the formation of exclusive policy robots that destroy black people's records within debate. All these are, et cetera, et cetera. All these are reasons as to why the kind of reading of the affirmative does not actually make sense insofar as it doesn't change or implode the system. Rather, it turned the gaze of settlers onto black people who attempt to be radical, who attempt to try to generate any sort of meaning themselves. The alternative is the poetry doesn't necessarily solve any of that, but rather it allows us to kind of traffic and move within those forms of violence. The Robin James argument will probably be cross-applied as a reason as to why our performance is bad. One is that you have conceded that that's still linked to the affirmative insofar as you've read the mode evidence, which is another example of pornotroping, i.e. the idea that you can become a fugitive. You can traffic in those forms of social life that black people utilize and transmit that poetry onto black people's flesh. Is not something that is actually radical. It's not something that is able to change the way that we interact with one another within debate, but rather it gives you a shield from which to move within this activity. You've also conceded the kind of arguments about Bobby Hutton, i.e. the ways in which you fetishize the ways in which the what he fetishizes death, i.e. that it was kind of the why do you thirst for death argument, which is that the kind of utilization of instances of black suffering in the past in order to supplement your own theories of resistance is simply a move to understand this is simply a move to understand the self, to create a kind of metaphysical relationship to reality that dispossesses a view of the actual materiality of interpersonal relationship. Remember, our argument about the way that we interpersonally relate to each other is not about gradability, it's not about structures, it's not about any of that, but rather how you actually confront real life people, i.e. What was the example that was going? Oh yeah, the Bobby Hutton example. The death of Bobby Hutton did not translate into some sort of radical change or a kind of understanding of the self. Rather, instead, it positioned the Black Panthers within their relationship to structural grief. It created a form of trauma. It brought the state closer and closer to the repression of Black people, and it instead has led to a form of melancholy, a kind of fear of being radical in the first place, a kind of turn toward liberalism as a way to protect ourselves from increasing state repression when we can simply jog across the street and be shot for absolutely no reason. The argument that I'm making here is that the affirmative is not only not able to understand that, but traffics that type of meaning, that type of grief as a way to understand the self as being more radical, when in reality it is Black people who continually do the dying. That means that you're not able to resolve any of the opposite you're going for, but you also did not specify an impact in the 1AR that you're able to solve. You instead went for a ton of offense that doesn't even matter, since I'm not going for the critique itself. itself. Now, you should cross-apply the illegibility often from the alternative, though. The poetic intervention of the 1DC operated as a refusal of the 1DC's metaphorical drive towards death and listen through the central troping of black flesh as a means to authorize their vision of the self. They could see that interpersonal relations precede the kinds of violences that perpetuate at a structural level the theorization of institutions as a process of linguistic determination obeys the way in which white people inscribe meaning onto black people's lives as a source of utility. It's not merely institutional, it's not a simulation. It proceeds past the framework of ontology and gradability, which they have no game on. The libidinal economy argument is new, but it doesn't overdetermined subject formation. We have argued that subject formation is bad and operates through the construction of the master notion of self, which is a critique of psychoanalysis as a universalizing structure. Hence the argument that we don't have the capacity to understand things the same way because of how we are highlighted at the level of structural positionality. It also turns over the communicative capitalism thesis arguments, since the position of the slave operates to generate the master's construction of a notion of self through the reduction of black people to personal property. It also means, yes, you have never been a commodity in the first place. Just because you're a consumer doesn't mean that you've actually been consumed. It doesn't mean that you've been actually consumed, which is the doesn't mean that you've been actually consumed, which is why our arguments about blackness at the level of ontology are not saying that blackness itself is ontological, but nor is it an ability to diagnose black suffering, but rather saying that there's a structural relationship that allows white people to dictate and inscribe meaning onto what black people do, how we move in the world, etc., and then utilize that as a way to justify policing. Remember, Kate also said, this is another line-by-line argument, that nothing can be understood. Our argument is that you still attempt to understand blackness and indigeneity as reference for constructing your notion of the self, for describing what you do. The problem with debate, etc., while insulating yourself from that structural antagonism. They say that debate is not a site for transmission of experiences, is a denial of transmission of experiences, etc. You just started to theorize about what you do in debate. I don't send speech talks back and forth, but teach students to rethink their position at the level of the interpersonal, the question of what types of stressors actually happen in these debates, which they have not answered. Yeah.
I'm gonna run the rest of my prep. 4:45. Alrighty, that is time. I'm gonna be honest in terms of giving an order, like, if y'all aren't already flowing straight down at this point, like, I don't know what other people were doing, but that's where I'm at. Oh, that was startling. Okay, wait, where did my mouse go? Oh. Oh my God, that was almost bad. I almost knocked over another Red Bull in this demo debate, which would have been kind of funny as like a trend, but I'm kind of glad that I avoided that. Is anybody not ready? Oh, I'm frozen. That's unfortunate. Let's see. Cool.
Thanks for the updates, y'all. I'm here.
Nice. 6 minutes. Let's do it. I've said it before, and I'll continue saying it. Water has lost its referent, as have all signs and signifiers. The idea that the world is knowable or reducible to representations or grammars is the way in which institutions continue to cohere reality. None of the claims that either side has made can be understood in a legible way without falling into the trap of grammar, the trap of language, the way in which those things are coded and overdetermined by systems and structures. There are a few key framing claims that filter this round. First is that language and grammar are pieces of representation which is fundamentally reductive and fails to contain reality. This is why you analyze form over content. The ways that grammar operates are not neutral and absolutely implicate the kinds of grammar that might be generated in the sociality of the alt. The second is that the debate space is not a site for generation of new relations. It's a discursive space, which means that it's over-coded by grammar and language. The libidinal economy operates via Lacanian understandings of lack and desire. These things are coded through language and grammars, which is the way that we communicate and interact in the space that we are in, which means that it's try or die for an understanding of grammar that does not cede itself to semiotics. That's third, the one he sees poetic insurrection functions as a grammarless grammar, a non-linguistic language, something confounding, something within the system, but not comprehensible by it. This is compatible with the alternative proven by the poetry that was read on Case. This is not a prescriptive strategy, rather an argument that the form of the one he sees is a necessary component to the content of the alternative. Fourth, ontological framing no longer describes reality. It relies on the notion of metaphysics that no longer implicates decision-making. Instead, hyperreality describes a grid that is operated via algorithm and automation, one that is rendered everyone fungible and then moved to generate new consumers. We have been reduced to code and commodified as such. Look at the way that social media creates or operates to create a community of people who are chronically online, but never interacting, never relating, never generating their own anything, really. This also overdetermines our social interactions because, as my opponent has functionally conceded, that those things are also linguistically determined. We communicate through grammar, we communicate through language, and if we determine the new kinds of relations that we need, the new kinds of socialities in a space that is already so accessible to the university, to the things that are scripted and overdetermined, the things we do will only serve to recreate the kinds of violences that exist in the grammar of the status quo. Next is the permutation. Add our form to their content. If it doesn't make sense, if it's a paradox and a double turn, that's just another net benefit. Even if they the unintelligibility and gratuity of anti-Black violence per their evidence highlights the need to mystify the condition of Blackness in order to avoid co-option mediation by the university, which means that it is another net benefit to the permutation. Even if they win a root cause or the kinds of framing arguments that are being made about the libidinality and anti-Blackness, even if violence did originate from the middle class, the people latch onto specific signifiers post facto, broken off from the root cause, which means that only the permutation resolves the specific kinds of linguistic and discursive violences that we've isolated. They haven't addressed the ways in which the sign economy prefigures social interactions. Like I said, they occur on the grid, just like everything else. Data and information is everywhere. When I say that the individual has been reduced to a number on a screen, a data point has been rendered fungible, I do not mean in like an abstract sense. I mean that the systems of power that make decisions, that structure society, that figure institutions, that determine the things we do and the ways that we interact in the language that we learn in public schools, that those decisions are made by an understanding of like no sociality, of where in which death is already assumed because we are not seen as people. We are seen as pieces of the algorithm, as pieces of the code. The impact is cruel attachments. The app is not radical because debate is not a site that can generate new potentialities. Rather, we are a scrambling of the code. The move to create socialities is not neutral in this space, and the alternative needs can only function under the permutation. Otherwise, the presumed neutrality of creating new socialities and grammars renders it ineffective. Some line by line. I did engage with the poem. That's the answer that I've extended. It proves that the permutation is not mutually exclusive, and it means that that those two strategies are functionally compatible. Next is the answer to pick out of me and my performance. What the role of the ballot has never been to vote for me as a person. It has been to will an event, which has actually gone conceded, which means that the role of the judge, the reason that you sign your ballot, is to run full force into the scrambling of the system, into death, into poetics, into the refusal to operate via grammars that are intelligible. And I had a specific, and I'm going to do the death stuff here. Why do I thirst for death? Because we are all already dead. We have been figured as numbers on a screen. We have been figured as grammars. We have been figured as I said grammars, that's not what I meant, but we have been figured as disposable. The politics of disposability requires automation, requires this grid system that allows us all to be moved around like chess pieces on a playing board for the mechanisms of power and global financial capitalism. We have the ability to run into that death, to confuse the system, to scramble the code, to refuse the call to productivity, and understand that these things are not radical in this discursive space, but rather the refusal to understand these things as productive is the only way to generate any kind of solvency, with the understanding that any kind of solvency that's generated will not produce meaning. Last couple of things. They've said that I've dropped the examples, but I made the argument earlier, I believe in the Tracy, when I are, just kidding, that the refusal to reduce these things into language, into representations, is part of the point of the argument, is that there is no legibility in the kinds of language that we use to describe these things. To constantly try to trade experiences in this space will always be fundamentally reductive, and to sit here and try to talk through these things as if we could experience them through a computer screen while we throw words at each other, while we experience the dissuasive nature of information, is disingenuous and violent, which means that you vote affirmative.
All right, let's clap it up for the people who just gave this wonderful debate. Yes, yes, clap it up, celebrate it. Yes, yes. I am the floating voice because I looked tragic before, but I look even more tragic now, so I'm not going on camera. But to the folks who watch this debate, the IG vote poll is now up on our stories, so go ahead that way. If you, look at your flows, make an educated analysis of the round, and then head to the IG poll. A lot of you will not do that and will just vote how the wind takes you. But I want you all to, interact with us and let us know what you thought. For the students who are part of this, y'all know an RFD is due. So you have to have words, and the consultants who are in the debate are going to be looking forward to those words in your private research text channel. You cannot just say, I voted X, Y, and Z way. You have to say why, and what did the debate come down to, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's it. Thank you all so much for watching this Spar. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share this, and look forward to August 15th.